In the chaos of World War II, battles were fought not only with bullets and bombs, but with illusion, deception, and sound. Among the many unsung heroes of the war was a small secret unit, men who carried paintbrushes instead of rifles, record players instead of mortars, and courage of a different kind. They were called the Ghost Army, an extraordinary group of American soldiers whose mission was not to destroy, but to deceive. Their story remained hidden for decades, but their quiet bravery and cunning saved thousands of lives and helped bring the war to an end. The birth of an invisible army. They were officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a top-secret U.S. Army deception unit formed on the 20th of January, 1944, under the 1st Army commanded by General Omar Bradley. There were only about 1,100 of them, yet their assignment was unlike any other in military history. Their job was either to attack or defend, but to deceive, to make the enemy believe in entire divisions that didn't exist. The men who made up this strange new force weren't typical soldiers. Many of them had never seen a battlefield before. They came from art schools, advertising firms, radio stations, and design studios all across America. Some were painters and sculptors. Others were architects, sound engineers, or set designers. They were creative minds trained to build illusions, now being asked to use those same talents to win a war. Among their ranks were names that would one day become famous in post-war America, like Bill Blass, who would go on to become one of the country's best-known fashion designers, and Ellsworth Kelly, who would rise to prominence as a world-renowned painter. But in 1944, they were simply soldiers with a new kind of weapon: imagination. They trained in total secrecy on the English countryside. To the outside world, they were just another support group, a few engineers tinkering with camouflage. But behind guarded fences, these men practiced the art of deception with scientific precision. They learned how to deploy inflatable rubber tanks and trucks so realistic that even Allied pilots mistook them for real. They experimented with the direction of shadows and the placement of tire tracks to fool German reconnaissance planes. Everything, from the pattern of tents to the layout of fake command posts, had to look convincing from above. Their training also included sound, an entirely new dimension of warfare. At Bell Laboratories back in America, sound engineers had recorded the roars of tanks, the rumble of convoys, even the metallic clang of bridge building. These sounds were pressed onto giant phonograph records. On the battlefield, the men could project them through enormous loudspeakers mounted on trucks, sounds so loud they could be heard 15 miles away. In the darkness of night, the enemy would hear what they believed to be thousands of men and machines moving in, when in truth it was just a handful of trucks and a team of engineers with speakers and record players. They didn't stop there. Another group, the radio operators, were trained to impersonate entire divisions over the airwaves. They learned to mimic the tone, rhythm, and language of real signal units. Their job was to make German intelligence believe that a full army division was transmitting nearby, when it was all just a carefully crafted performance. Every detail was rehearsed to perfection. Fake headquarters were built, complete with tents, laundry lines, and phony signs. Men posed as generals and officers to give the illusion of command. They even spread rumors in nearby French villages, knowing that enemy spies would overhear them. Every whisper, every truck track, every flicker of light was part of the illusion. It was deception at a scale the world had never seen before. While most armies fought with bullets and bombs, this one fought with sound and paint, with radio signals and rubber. Their weapons were ingenuity and imagination. And their battleground was the enemy S-mine. To the upper command, they were a weapon of pure brilliance. To the Germans, they would soon become ghosts, an invisible army appearing and disappearing across Europe, confusing even Hitler's best strategists. And for the men of the Ghost Army, their strange war of shadows was just about to begin. When D-Day came, the 6th of June, 1944, the Ghost Army did not storm the beaches. While tens of thousands of Allied soldiers fought their way onto the sands of Normandy under heavy fire, the men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops waited in silence. Hundreds of miles away in England, they were not built for direct combat. Their war would begin in the shadows. Their moment arrived just a few weeks later, as the Allies began pushing inland through the hedgerows and farmlands of northern France. The Germans were regrouping, still powerful, still capable of counterattack. The Allies needed every strategic edge they could get. And now, it was time for deception to play its part. Their first major operation took place near Normandy, in the countryside surrounding the town of Saint-Elati. The mission was simple in theory, but incredibly dangerous in practice: to make the Germans believe that an entire U.S. armored division, the 6th Armored Division, was preparing for a massive assault miles away from where the real attack would happen. If the ruse worked, German reinforcements would move in the wrong direction, leaving the real Allied forces with a clear path forward. The Ghost Army went to work. Under cover of night, truck convoys rolled into the empty fields. By dawn, The landscape had transformed into what looked like a full-scale military encampment. Inflatable Sherman tanks and jeeps dotted the terrain, life-sized and unbelievably realistic from the air. Camouflage nets fluttered above fake artillery positions. Artists and set designers painted mud and oil stains on the rubber vehicles to make them look battle-worn. They even stenciled the exact unit insignias of the 6th Armored Division onto the sides of trucks and tanks, copying every detail down to the last brushstroke. Meanwhile, the sound crew set up their speakers, enormous 500-pound amplifiers mounted on the backs of trucks. These weren't ordinary sounds. Engineers from Bell Labs had spent months recording real tank convoys and troop movements, capturing everything: the clatter of treads, the grind of engines, the distant shouts of soldiers. The recordings were then mixed into loops that could be played in sequence, creating the illusion of a massive armored column moving through the night. From miles away, German scouts could hear what sounded like an entire mechanized army rumbling toward them. They watched through binoculars and saw what looked like endless rows of tanks and trucks glinting under the sun. Radio operators from the Ghost Army transmitted messages designed to match the chatter of the real 6th Armored Division, making the deception complete. Every element, the visuals, the sounds, the signals, blended perfectly. German reconnaissance aircraft flew overhead, took photographs, and reported back that a large American force was gathering. The enemy believed every bit of it. They diverted units and artillery to meet this supposed threat, leaving other areas dangerously exposed. When the real Allied divisions advanced elsewhere, they met far less resistance than expected. The ruse had worked brilliantly. A few hundred artists, sound engineers, and radio operators had outsmarted an entire German command. It was the Ghost Army's first test under fire, and they had passed with flying colors. For the men who had once painted billboards and designed posters, this was something entirely new. They weren't fighting with bullets or bombs, but with imagination. And for the first time, they saw just how powerful that imagination could be in war. As the Allied push continued through France, the Ghost Army grew bolder. With each mission, their confidence and their risk increased. They learned to operate just behind the front lines, sometimes no more than 3 or 4 miles from enemy artillery. At that distance, one wrong move could mean death. Yet, their job demanded they make as much noise, as much visual commotion as possible. By August of 1944, their deception operations had become a vital part of the Allied advance. They had carried out successful missions across Brittany and the Loire Valley, each one a masterpiece of illusion. Their sound trucks became legendary among the troops. These were massive vehicles loaded with amplifiers and speakers so powerful they could project sound for up to 15 miles. The engineers behind them were meticulous. They didn't just play random noises. Every detail was planned like a symphony. The metallic grind of tank treads, the distinct rumble of different engines, the occasional burst of shouted orders or the squeak of turning turrets. They even adjusted the echo and pitch depending on the terrain, to make it sound utterly convincing. From a distance, it was impossible to tell the difference between the Ghost Army's fake division and a real armored force. A few trucks with the right recordings could make a handful of men sound like 30,000 soldiers on the move. In one particularly daring operation, they simulated the construction of pontoon bridges over the Loire River. Engineers recorded the sounds of hammering, splashing, and heavy vehicles rolling onto makeshift platforms. Late at night, those recordings were played at high volume along the riverbank, while fake bridge sections and decoy lights were set up to sell the illusion. German observers listening in the darkness were convinced that the Allies were preparing a massive river crossing at that point. Meanwhile, the real crossing, carrying actual troops and armor, took place miles away, completely unopposed. A handful of sound engineers had just diverted an entire German response force, using nothing more than recorded noise and clever placement. At times, the deception bordered on the surreal. The Ghost Army had to think like actors as much as soldiers. Men dressed as generals held fake strategy meetings inside empty tents. They created entire headquarters out of nothing: wooden desks, empty typewriters, fake maps pinned to canvas walls. Military police, or MPs, were stationed at crossroads to direct convoys that didn't exist, giving false directions to anyone who might be watching. And then there were the whispers, the most subtle and perhaps the most dangerous part of their deception. Members of the Ghost Army would visit nearby French villages. Wearing the insignia of real divisions, they'd drink at local cafes, talk loudly about upcoming movements, and mention places they were headed next. It wasn't random chatter. Every word was planned. They knew the Germans had informants scattered among the civilians. They wanted their fake plans to be overheard. In this strange theater of war, rumor itself became a weapon. Every lie they told, every illusion they built, bought precious time for real soldiers to fight and survive. But the danger was constant, because the closer they got to the front lines, the thinner the line between illusion and death became. By early 1945, the Allies were advancing toward Germany itself. The Ghost Army now faced their greatest challenge: the Rhine River crossings, one of the final barriers before entering the heart of the Third Reich. The real crossing would take place near Remagen, but the Germans were watching closely. The Ghost Army's mission: create a convincing illusion of an entire army preparing to cross 30 miles away. They set up hundreds of inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces. Generators powered fake camp lights, creating the glow of a vast military encampment visible from the air. Meanwhile, sound crews blasted recordings of engines, bridge building, and men shouting commands in the darkness. To complete the illusion, radio operators mimicked the chatter of the Ninth Army, down to the rhythm, tone, and habits of specific commanders. German intelligence intercepted every word and believed it all. For several days, German forces focused their defenses on the fake crossing. By the time they realized the truth, the real American units had already crossed the Rhine, gaining a crucial advantage in the final push toward victory. That deception, known as Operation Viersen, was the Ghost Army's masterpiece. It was perhaps the most successful military illusion ever executed by American forces. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, the Ghost Army's mission was complete. But their work remained classified. Even their families had no idea what they had done. For more than 40 years, their story was buried in military archives. The men of the Ghost Army returned home quietly, many resuming their careers as artists, designers, and engineers. Among them were future famous names like Bill Blass, who became one of America's top fashion designers. It was until the 1990s that their operations were finally declassified. Historians began piecing together the incredible truth that an entire division of artists and engineers had deceived Hitler's army again and again, and saved countless lives in the process. In 2022, the U.S. Congress awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Ghost Army, one of the nation's highest honors. It was a recognition that came decades late, but never too late to honor courage and ingenuity. Their work showed that wars can be won not only with strength, but with imagination. In the story of World War II, some heroes carried rifles. Others carried paintbrushes, wires, and speakers, but all fought for the same purpose: to bring freedom back to a darkened world. The Ghost Army proved that deception, when wielded with courage and creativity, can save lives instead of taking them. And in doing so, they left behind a legacy not of destruction, but of brilliance.